All right, guys, what is going on? First off, happy weekend. It's Saturday, man. Everybody should be knocked the fuck out. Your girl probably smacked the shit out you because she checked her phone. All this stuff. Who knows? Your mom probably getting on you right now. But hey, at least it's the weekend. Haha, no school either. I know how you feel. Anywho, let's go ahead and talk about probably one of the biggest balance patches that we've received that improved offense overall. And we kind of got to critique it, but in my own personal opinion, and I think this is where a lot of people can agree on, we don't want this to change. This is perfect. Like, I'm not joking. I'm not kidding. None of it. This is perfect overall. And I'm saying this as somebody who, the type of characters that I run is a real mixture of the in between, right? I don't really run Jack, Lou, Nathan. Of course, I got Kaji up there, Clara up there, but I don't really run them as well, right? I'm looking at other characters that I do enjoy. So I'm not really mad about the fact of how, offense has really taken over. You're seeing a lot more riskier shots that people are making, especially from 3 point. And it's awesome, right? Like, we've been down in the dumps about defense for many, 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 many damn months, right? And it all started with Giant G. You could say it started with Giant G up to Kaji, up to the latest, point guard that is Kaji. I'm not really gonna count Ampan because Ampan's a collab character, and she's more of just of a balanced out type of character, right? But from Giant G to Kaji, we've been dealing with a niche format of gameplay where it just didn't really matter what character you ran. If it wasn't any form of a defensive character, there was no point running a character like MC. There was no point running a character like Chloe Ayla during that time. There was no point running a character, obviously, like Jenna, and Jenna's one of the worst fucking shooting guards to exist. But with this patch overall, we are seeing a revived state for offense. We are seeing some characters come back, right? Even though, as I just mentioned, Jenna is ass, but guess what? With this patch right here, she's looking like one of the most deadly shooters in the damn game. And that's not something you really want to see, but Jenna is not like, high diff. You know what I mean? Like, she's not somebody who's just like overall stupid as if she was a meta character, right? But she does seem better overall than where she was originally. Now, the main complaints that you hear about when it comes to this patch, and this is only from the sweats. I didn't really see anyone like as a new player or anyone who's been here for a good minute. I didn't really see anything on our ends versus the sweats ends. And the thing that matters to the most right now when it comes to the sweats, fingertip block and blind D in some cases aren't really doing its thing. Now, if you understand why this patch had came out, is because there was a lot of complaints about defense, specifically Imped, right? You've seen people running not only P buff Imped, but also the fact of pets, and then also introducing Imped into skill trees. That is not good overall because people talk about, yo, I got like a 20 plus Imped rate, right? And this is just a lot of impact on the floor, right? This is something that, what makes shooting guards feel lackluster, ain't really doing shit. Also, of course, on top of the fact, we're seeing other positions get improved on. But at the same time, though, it just didn't really feel like or mattered as much when it came to certain characters. And that wasn't good overall. But this patch made it to whereas your stats matter a lot more and your stats can potentially ignore as much imped as it can. Now, that doesn't mean imped is in a total lost state. You could still be running imped. We have to remember, imped was never nerfed. Only stats was just improved to matter a lot more. And you also are saying bigs that don't really have a 3 point, not really shooting threes anymore. You'll still see it, right? You'll still see them make, 1 to 2 threes. That's not, the whole point, right? But the whole consistent level has been dialed down just a bit. They do probably need to tweak that, a little bit more, but it has been dialed down overall. And everybody is loving it, right? But the only reason why the sweats are complaining about what they're complaining about is because of things like fingertip block and of course in some cases you are talking about blind D. Now, the real question though is should we expect a tweak, or should we expect some form of a buff to defense? Who really knows, right? Because at this point in time, even though things are looking good, it's still about what we could potentially see in the near future. Because we all know Joy City loves their meta characters, right? Like they released them the way they are for a reason. They already talked about their how their own analytic view. Like not everybody is so dominant when it comes to these characters, and that's something I've always spoke on for the last 3 years of playing this game and making content for this game. So if you haven't known about it, I've always spoke on that. Just because you are a Jack or Lou, you know what I mean? Just because you are some of these characters does not mean you are going to have the same result. Yes, you will have to get better over time to potentially see those results, but that's like a 1 in a million chance. And not a lot of people resonate the same way when it comes to some of these characters. So that's what I like the most. For as a player base, we are pretty balanced out. That doesn't mean you can't get good, doesn't mean you can't get better. I'm just speaking on the terms of how it usually goes. Okay. So, in my own opinion, I do not believe that they need to buff defense. The one thing that the Sweats has always talked about, when it comes to IQ, when it comes to timing, when it comes to awareness, when it comes to CC, when it comes to pillar, when it comes to calc, when it comes to a lot of things, their own playstyle that you won't really see unless you run into them or like a duo trying to replicate some of those things. But let's just be real, like 1 in 10 chance of actually running into something like that. But anywho, I don't believe defense should be improved. I don't think defense needs to be fixed. I don't think they need to buff fingertip block or blind D, because the one thing that the Sweats have always mentioned with everything else that I listed is the fact of being skilled, right? The Sweats are skillful players. There's the reason why they're the top 1% in this community. Okay, even though this community is small, so you may be like the top 5% or top 6%, depending on how many players still play this game. But at the same time, though, they always talked about skill wise, right? Of course, it doesn't take skill to, play how this game goes and, spend money and have the advantage of that. But it's already been proven when it comes to spending money, it doesn't really matter because the only advantage that they have is just build. It doesn't mean as a player that just makes you overall better. Like it doesn't, right? So at the end of the day, when we're talking about skill, making defense what it is right now, I think that matters a lot, and I don't think it should change. I think when we're talking about what we've been going through for many, many, many months of defense, pretty much again, started with Giant G up to Kaji, we haven't really had the type of field that you think that we've had. And I don't really like the fact that, some of the Sweats came out and then talk about this is one of the worst patches in the game. When, like, bro, your play style is one of the worst ways to go against. Yes, players do have to get better, but nobody really cares about that. Like you just have some people who tend to play the game. That doesn't mean they don't want to win, but that also kind of means in the fact, you just got to let players do their thing, right? And if you lose to a certain way when it comes to the solo experience, when it comes to the way queue times are, the type of players that you may end up getting on your team, that doesn't necessarily take away from the fact of you potentially winning or losing, because why, you can always overcome something when it comes to the type of gameplay and the type of characters that end up getting released and all this other stuff. So I really like what they're doing with this balance patch. I don't think this should change. I think this really does open up for not only current characters but also potentially future characters, especially if Joy City decides to release a lot of offensive characters. Because again, Jenna still ass, but she's looking really, really good because of this buff. And I like that a lot. Now, do I think ooh, excuse. Now, do I think that, at some point in time, could this get repetitive? Could this mean a lot less in the terms of like, yo, with these risky shots and imped not really being effective? Not saying imped isn't effective, but just for what we're seeing right now, should 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 it just be buffed? At some point in time, I don't think that should be the case. I think if we're going to get better as a community, we got to leave it the way it is. Because that's the only way, bro. Like, we have to make sure the Sweats can't, We have to make sure this isn't a real complaint, right? And as you see right here in this gameplay right here, like I'm getting blocked, but I'm just tossing it just to toss it because we've been lost, bro. Like, you know, when the big couldn't get the rebound, like look at this. Like this was a handicap match, man. Like I'm the only one doing my thing. But at the same time though, I like the I like the balance patch. I don't think this should change. I think this is where, it matters the most, especially as a player. This could also encourage newer players to do their thing. This also encourages, shooters, actual shooters in the game take advantage of what they're seeing, and just having defense being, a skillful process where now you're going to have to like really, what would you say, do a lot more on your end to, really succeed because of the type of characters that still exist. It's not like these characters are nerfed, right? It's just a lot of people are switching off of imped to jump shot block to really make things matter. And, if that's what it takes for you to get the results that you need to get, then fine. But that's pretty much it for this video. Let me know what you guys think. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, share it up, and I'm out. Happy weekend.